Hey, it's Matt, your average gamer, and for this video, we're going to be going over 8 more strong and fun builds for New Game Plus and beyond. This is going to be on New Game Plus 7 with DLC Plus. This is Max Scaling. We're going to start here at number 8 with Bleed and Frost. So real quick, before we continue talking about this build, I want to go over how the scaling works because I was a little bit confused too in the last video in terms of how the scaling works. So there's New Game Plus 7, there's DLC, and there's DLC Plus. So what that means is it doesn't go up 8 more times with DLC. I assume since I went through the second time and it went up, or it would continue to scale. It doesn't though. There's just DLC and DLC Plus. So the second run in DLC on New Game Plus 7 for the base game will be max scaling. I hope that helps you in terms of your journey. So if you're starting from the beginning and you go all the way up to New Game Plus 7 and you've beaten DLC once and you've gone into it a second time, that'll be max by the time you get to Journey 8. If you start at New Game Plus 7 before DLC, Journey 9 with the second run through DLC will be max. And now you can probably understand why it's a little bit confusing, because it is. And essentially what it does is it notices that you have the Erdtree fragments in your second run through DLC and then scales up further based on that, because when you go back into it, the odds are you're going to have between 15 and 20 to start. And back to this epic battle with Mesper, who's really difficult on DLC Plus with New Game Plus 7 scaling. Now, as far as Blood and Frost, I enjoy this more than Bleed and Bleed. It's not as good as pure Bleed, but it is fun to use, especially if you can get them to proc together. You could take huge chunks of HP off bosses' health bars. It's probably the least fun one on the list, but one of the more powerful ones on the list to use, especially since you should be going for a lot of percentage damage, frost, bleed, etc. for the scaling here, because again, having that average HP around 60,000 for most of the bosses is crazy. Yeah, so later in this video, you're going to see a whole bunch more remembrance bosses, side bosses, etc. I think there's 4 remembrance bosses and 4 side bosses, so we got a good amount of variety here and a good amount of variety in our builds as well. Let's jump into equipment, stats, everything you need to know for a very good Blood and Frost build. And now for equipment, we have a Gargoyle's Twin Blade in Blood Affinity with Seppuku, and then we have the other one in Cold Affinity with Chilling Mist. Any seal for buffs. We have the Raptor's Black Feathers and White Mask, Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, Claw Talisman, Dragoncrest Great Shield Talisman, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Thorny Tier, Faith Tier, and we're using Boiled Crab as well for some extra defense. And now we're going to go over stats for this build. We're going to run this as a Strength and Arcane build. So we have 40 Strength, 45 Arcane, 25 Faith with the Faith Tier, 32 Endurance, 15 Mind, 60 Vigor. We're using Golden Vow, Blessing's Boon, and of course Boiled Crab for some extra defense. And next one up here at number 7 we have is a Blood Tax build. A lot of people are asking me for a Blood Tax build. It's really fun to use because you could heal back a lot of HP. And for this, I went for more physical damage and chose the Naginata with Bloodflame Blade in Keen Affinity. And you can beat a lot of the NPC type enemies with a build like this because you can essentially stun lock them. As long as you have enough endurance, you can continue to apply pressure. And with Bloodflame Blade, you'll be getting around 90 bleed build up and a good amount of physical damage too. And this works on boss as well too, because you're constantly healing back HP with Blood Tax, and you're getting a good amount of physical damage as well. That's the big thing here. You're not in Blood Affinity, so you're not getting the damage reduction. Bloodflame Blade's going to give you good bleed build-up. Let's jump to equipment and stats. And of course, we have the key Naginata with Bloodflame Blade, and we have any seal for buffs, part of the Rakshasa set, and the White Mask on. Rotten Wing Sword Insignia. We have the Shard of Alexander, Lord of Blood's Exaltation. We have Melissa's Prosthesis. We have the Thorny Tier, Faith Tier, and of course we're using Boiled Crab again as well too. And that's for some extra defense, and it's always suggested to use that if you take hits. If you don't take hits, you could use Flame Grabbing Strike. That'd be perfect for this build. We have 60 Vigor, 22 Mind, 28 Endurance, 16 Strength, 75 Dexterity with Melissa's Prosthesis, 25 Faith with the Faith Tier. Then we're using Golden Vow, Blessing's Boon, and of course we're using Bloodflame Blade as well for that extra 40 bleed to give us a total of 90 bleed build-up. Alright, next up here at number 6, we have the Claws of Night build. The Claws of Night are really good. Even on New Game Plus 7 with DLC Plus, they're good because of the Ash of War mainly. Scattershot Throw is excellent for bleed build-up and has a good amount of distance too. And it's also really fun to use these. I like Claws. They're a little bit more challenging to use because you have to be up and close with every single boss you're going to have to get close to for the most part. But the advantage with the Claws of Night is they have that ranged attack so that when you back off, you can still do damage and bleed build-up. By the way, you do not have to hit whatever boss you're facing or enemy you're facing with all of Scattershot Throw. If you just clip them, it seems to do the same amount of bleed as if you hit them with all of it in its entirety, which is awesome. By the way, I want to mention something real quick. If you're not subbed, be sure to hit the sub button and definitely sub if you want to see more builds like this one. But if you want to see more New Game Plus 7 builds with DLC Plus, be sure to hit the like button and comment as well so I know what to create for you in the upcoming Elden Ring build videos. I am covering Black Myth too. I'm going to do a couple of videos for that most likely. My review is up. I'll leave that in the description below, along with part 1 of the New Game Plus 7 builds. That'll also be in the description below. Be sure to check those out after this video. And we're going to continue to build up bleed, do a lot of damage. These have really high DPS if you could stack successive hits, and the Ash of War is absolutely amazing. Let's go over equipment, stats, everything you need to know for a great Claws of Night build. We have Claws of Night, preferably plus 10. You can run Assassin's Gambit on a dagger to smoothly go past most enemies. Any seal for buffs, Rakshasa set, White Mask. We have the Ritual Sword's Talisman for Scattershot Throw, Shard of Alexander for that as well, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Millicent's Prosthesis for when you're hitting fast, Authority tier, Faith tier, and then we're going to be using Boiled Crab for defense too. And let's jump into stats on this one. For stats, we have 60 Vigor, 22 Mind, 28 Endurance, 16 Strength. We have 75 Dexterity with Millicent's Prosthesis, 25 Faith with the Faith tier. And we're going to be using Golden Vow. Blessing's Boon is great for some extra HP. It'll give you an extra flask in battle in total, roughly speaking. And then we're using Boiled Crab for defense as well too. All right, at number 5, we have the Starfist build. I really enjoy the Starfist. A lot of people are asking me for a fist weapon build. They're probably the best amongst the class. They're honestly amazing for poise damage and for successive hits and bleed buildup as well. By the way, something worth noting here is I like to use charge attacks. There was one break and then bleed proc, so he ended up getting out of the break there because he was stunned again. But mainly on New Game Plus 7 with DLC Plus, don't rely too much on poise damage. I'm just using the charge attacks because they do a good amount of damage in general. But mainly, I'm going to be using that in combination with Endure and then going in for successive hits as well, too. If you can't get too many breaks, go in for those successive hits. You're going to get a lot of bleed buildup and a lot of damage with these. They're impressive weapons. The reason why you see a lot of speedrunners use these. Now, we're at 150, so I don't want to split my stats in Blood Affinity, so we went for Heavy Affinity as a Strength build with Blood Flame Blade. Let's jump into equipment and stats. We have the Heavy Starfist with Endure. We're using Blood Flame Blade. We have Any Seal for our buffs. We're using Rakshasa set, and we have the White Mask on. Then we have Rottenwing Sword Insignia. We have Millicent's Prosthesis. We have the Axe Talisman. We have Lord of Blood's Exaltation. We have the Charge tier, Faith tier, and we're using Boiled Crab as well for some defense. All right, let's jump into stats on this build. And no surprise here, stats-wise, we have 75 Strength, which is pretty incredible. It's going to give us close to 500 AR on these weapons. With Blood Flame Blade, you're going to have over 550. We have 60 Vigor, 19 Mind, 30 Endurance, 25 Faith with the Faith tier. And of course, we hit over 51 Poise. I know we're overusing the Rakshasa set, but it adds more damage to everything. Eventually, I'll add in more variety for sure, because I feel like that set's getting used a lot. And we're using Golden Vow, Blessing's Boon, and Blood Flame Blade for our buffs. You're going to get around 85 bleed buildup, which isn't too bad because these are quick. By the way, these are ranked in terms of fun, not power. If you're ranked in terms of power, a lot of these are actually backwards because I kind of enjoy the stuff that's a little bit tougher to pull off for the most part. Next up here, we have one that's built around Sacred Blade, the Ash of War itself, which can be incredible in DLC. So Commander Gaius, as well as the Putrescent Knight, take amazing damage from Sacred Blade. Most of the bosses do because holy damage is really good in DLC. So if you combine that with successive hits and use the Ash of War a lot, you can get a lot of holy damage in on these bosses. With that said, I get trampled here and beat up a lot because I really don't do well with this boss. This is actually one of the harder bosses for me because once I start to get hit with his charge with a medium roll, which is kind of unreliable, it kind of messes me up for the entire fight. That and the fact that I just don't like this fight. Out of all the DLC fights, I actually enjoy Concert Radahn more than this fight because at least at the end of that fight, it's rewarding. You took on a challenging boss with a difficult moveset, and when you take him down, you feel good about it. With Commander Gaius, you don't really get that feeling, and his moveset is kind of annoying. Yeah, I don't know who gave the pass to basically say, oh, the charge is completely reasonable. It's honestly not. Reliably dodging it from time to time, yeah, I mean, you can get lucky with it on occasion, but if you want to reliably dodge it every single time, a light roll it's possible, but for a medium roll, it's really difficult to do, and I feel like a lot of players are going to be using a medium roll. All right, back to Sacred Blade. I missed there because I wasn't paying attention to the fact that I didn't have enough FP. I thought I did with the little amount. Sacred Blade doesn't take that much. I was like, oh, I probably had enough. I didn't really look, though. But anyways, yeah. Amazing Ash of War for DLC. A lot of bosses take good holy damage. Let's jump into equipment and stats. And for equipment, we have the Sacred Black Steel Twin Blade, plus 25 preferably. We have any steel for buffs. Of course, we're using Sacred Blade, Rakshasa set, and the Tree Sentinel helm on. And we have the Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, Shard of Alexander. We have Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman. We have the Sacred Scorpion Charm, of course. And we also have the Holy Tier and Thorny Tier 2. And now we're going to go over stats for this build, and then we got a couple more good ones for you, including a Fire Knight's Greatsword build and Burno Flame. We have 60 Vigor, 20 Mind, 31 Endurance, 18 Strength, 22 Dexterity, 60 Faith. By the way, the reason I have a little bit of extra strength and dexterity is because I was running this as the same way I ran the Holy Jumps build in the last video. That's not really built around the Ash, but it could do a lot of damage. Definitely check that one out in the description. And for this, we're using Golden Vow, Blessings Boon, and then we're using Black Flames Protection instead of Boiled Crab. They're kind of similar. I think Boiled Crab is slightly better, though. But if you don't want to use a consumable, Black Flames Protection is excellent if you're running a Faith build. Anyway, it's perfect for that. And the next up here at number 3, we have Burno Flame. Burno Flame is incredible in the DLC if you can land it. It has a lot of RNG, but it has the potential to do massive damage, and it really truly is an amazing damage type in Fire, which isn't as bad as we thought it would be in DLC. Yeah, excellent damage type for the base game, and a pretty good one for DLC, too. Not as good as Holy in the DLC. Holy is absolutely the best, but Fire's right there with pretty much every other damage type. It's fine for the most part. Even Mesmer only has 40% resistance to Fire. And this boss takes additional fire damage. Romina takes, I believe she has minus 20 in terms of her resistance, which is excellent. Really good ending there, by the way. And also, if you saw how much HP she has, between 50 and 60,000 again. They have so much HP on New Game Plus 7 with DLC Plus. By the way, this character, Banished, which is my Xbox character, is on Journey 39, and this is the second run for DLC for all footage. Let's jump into equipment, stats, everything you need to know. And we have 2 giant seals where you can use the jellyfish shield if you don't have 2. We also have the frenzied seal because I like frenzied burst for basically mobs and distance. Now we're using the Rakshasa set again here, of course. Ritual Sword Talisman, Godfrey Icon, Fire Scorpion Charm. We have the Phlox Canvas Talisman, and then we have the Flame Tier and Faith Tier as well. And now we're going to jump into stats where we have 60 Vigor, 24 Mind, 26 Endurance, 16 Strength, 15 Dexterity. We have 80 Faith with the Faith Tier, Golden Vow, Blessing Spoon, Flame Grant Me Strength, Burno Flame, and Frenzied Burst. At number 2, we have the Fire Knight's Greatsword. I know a lot of people were looking for this one to appear, and it is still pretty good on New Game Plus 7 with DLC Plus. I really like it with Flame Spear, especially because you get a good distance attack, and it's great against the Shadow Tree avatar. I actually end up barely getting hit in this fight, and the reason I barely get hit in this fight is because the Fire Knight's Greatsword is a really reliable weapon. With Flame Spear, which is chargeable, you get the ranged attack. For a lot of bosses, you're going to get a little poise damage too, although that means a little bit less in New Game Plus 7, but the big selling point is massive fire damage. Yeah, I keep saying this over and over again, but I can't stress it enough. As far as this, I don't think you can actually break the Shadow Tree Avatar. I'm not sure if you can. I believe it's just he breaks at the end of every one, and he has 3 phases. But for posture damage on New Game Plus 7 with DLC Plus, posture breaking is going to be quite rare. Do not rely on that solely. Have good builds built around it a little bit, but go for damage more so. And this is because if a boss has 120 poise, right, on base new game, they will have 30% more. So they will then have over 160 on New Game Plus 7, which is insane. If a boss has 150 poise, they will then have close to 200, around 200 poise in total. That would be your bosses like Placidusax and, of course, Elden Beast, and I believe Radahn as well would be included in that conversation. I'm only mentioning all this, by the way, because if you're wondering when you're facing bosses why they're so difficult to break, it's just because poise goes up with each journey, maxing out at Journey 8. I don't think there's any effect on poise with DLC Plus, but up to New Game Plus 7, you're going to have around 30% more poise for all bosses. Let's jump into equipment, stats, everything you need to know. And we have the Fire Knight's Greatsword in Flame Art Affinity, which is excellent for. It gets a B, by the way, with Flame Spear. We're using Rakshasa set and the Winged Serpent Helm. Any seal for buffs. Godfrey Icon, Shard of Alexander, Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman, Fire Scorpion Charm, Flame Tier, Faith Tier, and Boiled Crab for some defense. Alright, let's jump into stats for this build. We have 60 Vigor, 20 Mind, 31 Endurance, 18 Strength, 22 Dexterity. We have 70 Faith with the Faith Tier. And then we're going to be using Golden Vow, Blessing Spoon. And by the way, I keep Pest Thread Spears on me for any of the larger bosses, and because it does a ton of damage and is chargeable too. At number 1, we have Bubbles. Now, Bubbles I thought were completely useless now. I honestly thought after the nerf they were terrible, but I decided to add in the Rakshasa set, kind of do my buffs a little bit differently here and everything, go for Hal to kind of go for the glass cannon thing, and see how much damage I could get with the Bubbles. And as you can see, we stacked up 23,000 damage there early on. I want to calculate something, by the way, real quick. If you do the math, right now this dragon's missing roughly around 40-something thousand damage, and it still has almost half his HP bar. That's insane. He's got around 70,000 or more HP on New Game Plus 7 with DLC Plus. I'm going to state that this is too much for a side boss. I want you to comment below, though, and let me know if you think this dragon has too much HP. And if some of the bosses have too much HP on New Game Plus 7 with DLC Plus, let me know what your thoughts are, but I think over 70,000 HP is absolutely absurd. With that said, though, the Bubbles absolutely shred him, and I ran it as a Strength and Faith build, so you could do regular hits if you want to as well. But of course, for some of the bigger targets, your best bet is going to be the Bubble Spam. I have a lot of fun with this build. Let's jump into equipment. And we have the Envoy's Longhorn plus 10. We have any seal for buffs. We're using the Bubble Helm, of course, and then we have the Envoy's Crown, and then we have the Rakshasa set on, Ritual Sword Talisman, Shard of Alexander, Sacred Scorpion Charm. We have the Ritual Shield Talisman as well, because I'm kind of keeping my distance, Holy Tier and Faith Tier. And let's jump into stats for this build. We're going to go over everything you need to know to make a powerful bubble build, and I would use this for some of the bigger targets in DLC. We have 60 Vigor, 20 Mind, 24 Endurance. We have 40 Strength, that's 60 when we're two-handing this. 60 Faith with the Faith tier, 17 Dexterity. But you really only need the minimum Dexterity, and then we're using Golden Vow, Blessing Spoon, Pest Threads. I like Ancient Dragon, Lightning Strike, mixing that in too, and Hellish Brewery. Thanks for watching this one. Thanks for tuning in to my top 8 builds for New Game Plus and beyond. If you want to see the other ones for that, it's in the description below, and that's going to be the top 12, and those are going to be the most powerful ones. These lean a little bit more towards fun. If you're not subbed yet, be sure to hit the subscribe button. Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree has been awesome. I'm still going to be covering Elden Ring. My review for PS5 for Black Myth Wukong's in the description as well. If you haven't checked that out, be sure to check that out, and I hope everybody has a wonderful week.